Monday edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation today. Today, as you are aware, is not Memorial Day, it's Veterans Day, November 11th, in honor of the first armistice, or the armistice of World War I, which happened at the 11th day of the 11th month at the 11th hour. That's when the armistice was signed in 1918. It was expanded later by Presidents Eisenhower and Reagan to include veterans of World War II and the Vietnam War. So we honor basically all of our veterans, Korean War, you name it. We honor all of our veterans, all who have worn the uniform. We choose to honor them on this day. I'm proud that my father served in World War II. My father, as I've told some of you, was a conscientious objector. He had Mennonite background, and Mennonite is a pacifist religion. I disagree with that. I don't believe it's what the New Testament or the Bible teaches, but I appreciate the sincerity of their belief. They were conscientious objectors. They objected on grounds of conscience to taking up arms against anybody, no matter how just the cause. They did not believe in shedding of any blood human blood under any circumstances. Now, the Bible, I think, allows for that in a just war and execution. That's where you are allowed capital punishment. The shedding of blood is permitted if it's done by the state in the interest and pursuit of justice or national security. So I disagree with the Mennonites on that. And my father, I think, changed his views as he grew older. But when he went into the service, he was a CO, conscientious objector. But it did not mean he didn't serve. My father went into the military, World War II, and served as a medic. Now, a medic is there to save life, not to take life, but to save life, so Mennonites could serve in that capacity. Their job was to help wounded warriors get to a place of safety where they could get medical help. So my father exposed himself to considerable danger because the medics are always close to the front line. You got to be there where you can go get the guys when they're wounded, get them to safety, and get them treatment. So my father exposed, even though he was a conscientious objector and a pacifist, probably exposed himself to more risk and danger than many who were not of the pacifist persuasion. He told me a really moving story about after the Germans had surrendered, Japan was still fighting. The Pacific Theater was still open. He was put on a troop ship just full troop ship, and they were being sent to the Pacific Theater, to Japan, and we knew how brutal that was going to be. I mean, that's why we dropped the bombs, is because of the brutality of having to take the island of Japan by force. We knew they'd fight to the last drop. The casualties were going to be in the millions, and that's why, to save life, both civilian and military, we dropped the bombs on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and it worked. They surrendered. Millions and millions of Japanese lives and American lives were saved. But the way my father found out that World War II was over is they could sense on this troop ship that the ship was beginning to turn. They were steaming full steam ahead across the Pacific Ocean, and all of a sudden the ship began to slow and it began to turn, and they did not know why until the announcement came over the PA system that Japan had surrendered and World War II was officially over. He said, man, you haven't seen a celebration like that in your entire life. Now, another member of our team, Rob Gardner, who goes by Hot Shot, by the way. And Rob, I didn't figure out till today, you came by that moniker quite honestly. For those of you watching on television or tuning in on audio or video streaming, we've got a picture of Rob's dad. Rob Gardner is my director. We got a picture of his dad, part of the U.S. Army Air Corps, who served as the eyes of Patton's Third Army. You know about George Patton. Well, these were his eyes, the 12th TAC Recon Squadron. So, Rob, tell us a little bit about your dad, Bob, and his service in uniform in World War II.
Well, my dad actually, when he was 16, he went against my grandparents' wishes and would sneak out to the airport and saved all his money and took flying lessons. And then he had a hand up when he turned 18 and graduated high school. He enlisted in the Army Air Corps, and then went to basic training, and then he flew out of St. Petersburg Air Base and for a lot of his training. Then he went overseas to England first, and then over to France and Germany, and flew for eyes of Patton's Third Army the 12th Tactical Recon Division, and just had 75 combat missions and just doing the eyes of Patton. In other words, what they did is they would fly in low and fast, or up in the clouds high by instruments, and they would fly in and take photographs of enemy installations, and then get them back to the Patton's officers, and they would determine where they would send troops and how they would attack what was going on.
So these were 75 combat missions now. So, I mean, they're flying into enemy territory. They're looking to recon sites that have tactical significance and therefore very well could be heavily guarded by anti-aircraft weaponry. So these were combat missions. I mean, he was putting his life on the line for the United States and liberty every single time he got in the cockpit.
That's right, and he told many stories about, they would fly in, and as soon as they got them on radar, the Germans would start firing anti-aircraft, or what they call flak, and they would have flak just busting all around them, and they'd be flying in through the flak, get their photos, get out, and usually in a lot of cloud cover, flying instruments pretty well most of the time to try to stay safe. And they either came in, he was a P-51 pilot, and man, what an airplane! And they would fly in fast and low, get what they needed, and get out. And he did have 3 confirmed kills: a Messerschmitt, a Focke-Wulf, and a Storch. And the picture on the screen is a lot of the guys he served with, and one of them is a guy named Leo Elliott. And I'd love to get back in touch with the Elliott family. I'm sure Leo's gone on like Dad has, and but Leo had a son named Trey that was about my age. But it'd be nice to get back in touch with some of those guys. It was a tight bonding group that served together. They lived together, served together, fought together, and the ones that made it back had lifelong friendships.
Yeah, real band of brothers. Well,
That's
your
right.
dad went by the nickname Hot Shot Charlie.
That's right.
And,
that was his handle. They used that for when they were flying their missions. Hot Shot Charlie was his handle.
Yeah. Well, and your handle as a biker is Hot Shot. Did you inherit that from your dad?
Well, I actually, Dad died in '83, so when I started riding in the biker world, everybody has some kind of nickname, or what we call as a road name, and to honor Dad, I took on the name Hot Shot, and that's been sort of the story behind me being called Hot Shot. It wasn't any reason that I was a hot shot, but it was because of Dad.
Yeah, oh, that's fantastic. Well, thank you, Rob. I appreciate that very, very much. So Rob Gardner's dad, Bob Gardner, I mean, honest to goodness, hero, 3 confirmed kills, 75 combat missions. And just an ordinary, I mean, this was the beauty of this country. He's an ordinary American guy that was just willing to put his life on the line for the sake of his country and take enormous risks in order to protect our liberty. All right, Rob, thank you very much for that. One last thing I want to do before this segment is over. I was thinking this morning about the fact that in World War II, there was a special moment in World War II history when Winston Churchill and FDR met for the first time. It was on board a ship called the Prince of Wales in the North Atlantic, and I want to play just a little excerpt of what happened when FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Winston Churchill, 1941, met for the first time on board a battleship. You're going to hear Winston Churchill's daughter talk a little about the significance of that encounter. Listen to this.
540.
On Sunday, Roosevelt was carried on board the British battleship for a morning service. If nothing else had happened while we were here, Roosevelt told an aide, that joint service would have cemented us.
All the ship's companies all mixed up and sharing the hymn sheets and everything, and it really did seem rather wonderful and very moving. My father sat with the president. I mean, normally he would have stood during such a service, but he and the president sat, and everybody else stood on the quarterdeck. My father chose the hymns very carefully, his favorites.
The same language, the same hymns, Churchill said later. It was a great hour to live.
A little excerpt there were FDR and Winston Churchill, and this was by Winston Churchill's choice. They had a giant worship service, a giant church service on the deck of this warship, the HMS Prince of Wales. Winston Churchill organized this thing. He picked the hymns, and one of the hymns that he picked that they all sang together was Onward, Christian Soldiers. Now, just in passing, can you imagine our current commander-in-chief doing that today, getting on board an aircraft carrier, battleship, a destroyer, having a giant church service, and leading his troops in the singing of that song, Onward, Christian Soldiers? And the audio you heard, if you're watching on TV, you could see that was actual video of that on-board church service, Winston Churchill, FDR, sitting right next to each other, singing Onward, Christian Soldiers. And they understood that they were on a noble mission, a noble crusade. They were soldiers and warriors for Christ, flying under the banner of the flag of Christ. Here's how the first verse of that hymn goes: Onward, Christian soldiers, marching as to war, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Imagine that. FDR, Winston Churchill, every sailor on that ship singing the phrase, with the cross of Jesus going on before. Christ, the royal master, leads against the foe, forward into battle, see his banners go. You're familiar with this poem, but I want to finish with this by Charles Michael Province of the U.S. Army. It is the soldier, not the minister, who has given us freedom of religion. It is the soldier, not the reporter, who has given us freedom of the press. It is the soldier, not the poet, who has given us freedom of speech. It is the soldier, not the campus organizer, who has given us freedom to protest. It is the soldier, not the lawyer, who has given us the right to a fair trial. It is the soldier, not the politician, who has given us the right to vote. It is the soldier who salutes the flag, who serves beneath the flag, whose coffin is draped by the flag, and who allows the protester to burn the flag.